Your assignment is to make a collage. In this video, I'm going to show you two different transfer techniques on two different surfaces, and for lack of a better word, a way to make paint stickers out of your paint that you can use as collage material in your assignment. I've titled each section of the video so that you can scroll through it quickly if you want to find part of it to watch again.
So here I have a photocopy. This is from my printer, but I have a laser printer. So it's basically the same thing as a photocopy. This is toner that's been heated up and applied to the surface of the paper. That's what photocopiers and laser printers do. And then I've got a surface here, which is a 3/4 inch piece of plywood. Which I've gessoed and applied a couple coats of paint to. There's a red undercoat with a white coat that I manipulated to just create a sort of mottled and interesting surface. So I'm gonna apply acrylic medium to this. I'm gonna turn this over. I'm gonna stick it on. That's what's going to happen, and then I'm going to let it dry, and then wet the back and rub the paper away, and then the toner will be stuck in the acrylic medium, which I've applied onto the surface, leaving only the mark making that you see on this paper. Yeah, that's what's going to happen.
It's important to remember using this technique that the image you get in the end will be the mirror image of what's on the paper that you stick down. So prime example of this would be if you have text in your image, it won't be legible unless you hold it up in the end to a mirror. So if you want legible text or exactly what you have when you print it, then you've got to flip the image in a photo editing software.
I'm working quickly, but I'm also making sure that I've got acrylic medium everywhere I need there to be medium. Because if you don't have any medium that the paper's in contact with, it's not gonna glue to it. So you got to be careful to make sure to get that on there. Now, the other thing that's really important is to not get as little medium on the back side of the paper as you can. So see how I'm going along and I'm making sure there's a lot of good contact. But I'm not pulling as much as possible. I think I just did a little bit, but I'm not pulling any medium over onto the back side of the paper. And that's because what you're going to be dissolving or wetting and then rubbing away the back side of the paper, and the acrylic medium will protect the paper from the water that you apply to it if you're not careful. So I'm giving it a really good rub. Notice how I went carefully around the edge and got it down, but didn't pull medium onto it. Now I'm giving it a really good rub to make sure that I've got good contact everywhere. And now I'm gonna let it dry. But before I let it dry, I just don't really want those brush strokes that I put down when I applied the medium. And so I'm just blotting those brush strokes. I don't know if you can see that. I'd rather have the texture of this blotting blue paper than the brushstroke. It's not a big deal, but that's just what I was doing there. Okay, that's got to dry now. Here's the wood panel that has the paper glued onto it. It's all dry now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to spritz the surface of this, really soak it. You're going to start to be able to see the image through the paper. And then I'm going to start rubbing the paper away just with a circular motion with my fingers. Got to be really careful here. We lost some. You see that? That's probably because it wasn't glued down the way it should have been here. So now one thing that you're going to find is that you think you got all the paper off, but that's because it becomes transparent when it's wet. So I'm going to have to let this dry now that I've gotten sort of, a fair amount of it off. And then when it dries, it'll become very clear where there's more paper that needs to be removed. So as you can see, as it dried, you can see where the paper still needs to be rubbed away to a certain degree. And this was really not very visible before. And you'll see when I wet it, it's going to become less visible again. See how it just disappears? Almost, not quite. But so when you're doing the second rubbing, you don't necessarily wet everywhere first, because as soon as you wet it, you can't see where you need to rub anymore. And now that's gonna, eventually it's all gonna get wet anyway, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. But it'll give you a little bit better idea about where to rub if you don't wet the whole surface. And also, you might have to do this one more time to really get it to where you want it to be. And then if there's any left over, what I've found is that putting another coat of medium over the top of it sort of wets it for forever, so that you don't lose as much of the contrast as you think you're going to. I'm going to do a little surgery on this one as well, just to give you some ideas about how to fix problems that you encounter. I'll explain that when I get to it, but as I've said earlier, I lost this because it wasn't glued down properly. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to try to fix it, and I'll show you how I'm going to try to fix that.
Rubbing the paper off with your fingertips can be hard on them eventually. You can use an eraser to help rub the paper off.
So I'm just going to show you how I'm going to try to fix this area that I lost here because it wasn't glued down properly. So what I've done is I've taken another copy of the same image. I just cut out most of what I need, and I sort of laid it down just like this so that I could tell that it was sort of in the right place. I'm not being too finicky about this, and then what I did was I taped it so that it's on a hinge. So now I'm going to lay down some more medium, but only where I want it. I think that should be good. You know, because I didn't get enough on there the first time, just want to be really sure about it. Now I'm going to, using that hinge, lay it down. So that should hopefully give me another chance to get that part of the transfer done. We'll see how that goes. Here's the surgery that I was doing on this image where I lost some of the transfer when I was rubbing it off. So I'm going to wet this and I'm going to see how this worked. See, this is where I got some medium on the back, which unfortunately is right where I need to rub. Anyway, got to be careful about that. And let this sit for a little while. Look at this, was just a quick smear of medium onto the paper. Look at how it stops the paper from getting wet. It's pretty amazing. I think we can probably very gently deal with that. So in this case, some of this isn't even glued down, but I'm not going to pull it up. I'm going to rub it to get rid of it, because I don't want to, by accident, to peel off the toner. So it looks like it worked out pretty well. Basically, so just as a quick reminder, it just got this got 2 shots of the photocopy because I'd rubbed away a bit too much the first time around. And there we go. All right. So now this is also going to dry, and it's going to tell me where I need to rub away the paper a little bit more as well. And so I'm just going to put this aside to do that. I'm setting this paper up to do another transfer. So this is paper. This is the thick canvas paper that we showed you at the beginning of the course. It really does quite well when there's a couple coats of gesso on it. See, there's not a lot of no buckling at all in the paper. You're going to want a thick paper for this project, and it's got to be gessoed a number of times to protect it from the water that you're going to be spraying on it. When you rub away the paper on your transfer, okay? But before I make the transfer, I'm just saying, like, so here's this like weird picture of a cat. It's almost abstract, this picture of a cat. That's what I'm going to be putting down as a transfer. But I want to do something on the surface that I can react to later. So in this particular situation, I'm going to put a shape on the surface of the paper that relates to this, almost like an offset print that is a bit too offset. So they've got a kind of blue-gray uh, glaze that I have mixed up here. What this means is it looks opaque here, but look, I'll show you. If you look at it here, when I put it on, it's transparent. And really, what I'm doing with that is I'm mixing a medium into the color, which means that there's a fair amount of medium, and that's what gives it this transparency. And really, I'm just going to sort of take a look at this. I'm going to sort of say, okay, well, there's a mark here, there, and I'm just looking at this. Oops, I just got some on the back, and I'm just laying in again. So with this, I'm deliberately using I don't know why I always choose to use different tools besides a brush. You could certainly do something like this with a brush instead of the palette knife that I'm using. And really, like what I'm actually doing here is just showing you that sometimes you can make very arbitrary grounds, like the last one with the red ground. And sometimes you can do grounds that have a little bit more planning involved. I'm going to try something else here. So here's that same medium, which I just gave a little spritz of water to. And let's see what happens.
An old toothbrush can work really well to do the kind of thing I'm trying to do with a brush here.
So I'm really just going like this and adding some other spots and things to the surface, but not much. I just want something that I can react to. And those spots are gonna, for the time being, I'm gonna use a blotter, which hopefully won't, it sort of spreads them out a little bit, and but then also means that they're not gonna be too bothersome as sticking up from the surface at this point, because I want a flat surface to be working on when I do the transfer. So now I'm gonna let that dry. So I'm just going to put a layer now down of medium to stick this to. But some of you may have actually realized, seeing the video before, seeing the last section of it, that I actually, well, no, I didn't mess up that much. No, I kind of messed up. I messed up. Anyway, I think that what I was doing was this, putting this down, like this general shape, but really I had to be thinking of it like this, because this is how it's going down on the paper. So so this is a classic kind of printmaking issue that you've got to keep in mind, where you have to reverse things. You got to think about where you can't go like this and think, okay, it's going to be like this. It's actually going to be the reverse that you put down. I don't think it's going to be that big of a problem. I'm gonna put it down like this, but I'm happy that I was able to show you all that mistake. I'm gonna let this dry. So here's the one that I have on gessoed paper. I'm going to give that a spritz now and do the same thing as I did with the other one. Notice this white area right here. That's where I got medium on the back side of the paper, and so it's keeping it from getting wet. I do see that it's starting to get through there now. I'm going to do the same thing with this as with the board. I'm going to let it dry and then see where I need to rub away some more.
Here I'm just, I've come back and I'm looking to see where the paper remains, so I'm spritzing it again and just cleaning it up further. And you can see there that I'm using an eraser. I did this a lot as I was making these demos, and my fingers got a little bit aggravated. So eraser's a good bet if that happens with you.
So here I've cut out similar, I think you've seen these but all already. I separated the two toes from feet from one another, and I've cut out that weird looking cat again. And this time I'm going to show you how to do potentially make a film that you can then apply to your painting after you've rubbed off the back of the paper. So this time we're going to put a coat of medium on the front of this, and then we're just going to let it dry. I'm going to do that with each of these, and I'm going to put it on. It's a gel medium. I'm going to put it on with a spatula, and if you're using a medium which is more liquidy than gel medium, just put 2 coats on. So put it on with a brush, undiluted, let it dry, and then put it on with a brush again, and yeah. Two important things here. One, you don't want to get, just like before, you don't want to get the acrylic gel or acrylic medium on the back of the paper, because that's just going to make it harder for you to rub the paper away later. And also, when you're applying it, you know, what's going to be left is this film of acrylic. So you really have to make sure to get enough acrylic onto it that the film is not going to be too delicate. This process is a little bit more finicky than gluing it directly onto your surface, but it gives you a little bit more latitude when thinking about where to put it on your surface. Like, you can use it a bit more as a bit more of a collage element. So there's strengths and weaknesses to it. So nice thick coat. There we go. Try to even it out as much as you can, but don't, I'm being very gentle and I'm really trying hard to not push through to the paper and compromise the film that I'm putting on. Here I'm starting the next one. If you look at the film once it's dry, you want to inspect the film, and if you feel like there's any parts of it that weren't thick enough, or aren't thick enough, I should say, then it makes sense to go to just, you know, do another coat and strengthen that part of the paint film before you start trying to rub it away. I have had situations where I've been rubbing and being very careful, and then it tears. And it's not the end of the world if it tears, really, when you're, but if it tears too much, it becomes potentially unusable. So don't, like when we're doing this, I mean, I'll show you rubbing it away, and you might very well see it tear, but I'm trying not to have that happen. So this is how the piece of paper looks that has a thick coat of gel medium on it. I'm about to turn it over, wet the back, and start rubbing the paper off. So we're going to see how that goes. One thing I need to say quickly is that I used matte medium here. That's what I have most of. Gel medium is going to be a little bit more transparent than matte medium. What makes matte medium matte is that they put additives in it, and so those additives will be visible, and this will be a little bit more like vellum than like clear acetate when I've rubbed it all off. And you know, but still, when you put it down flat, it's still very transparent on the surface that you're using, but something to take into account. This has been sitting for 24 hours. And that's another issue that you want to be aware of, is that when you put a very thick coat of medium on the paper, it's going to take a while for it to dry. And if you don't put a thick coat, because you're working with, not with gel medium, but with a more liquid medium, then you'll have to put 2 coats on. And so you still, no matter what way you look at it, you have to realize that getting the film of medium on and then allowing it to dry is going to take you, 24 hours. That's what I would say, to allot yourself. So I'm using my fingers, but look here, I'm going to switch to an eraser. So certainly you can use an eraser. I find the eraser is actually maybe a little bit more aggressive than my finger. The more water, the merrier in this. So just keep on spritzing. Now you may end up tearing the film. It can happen. It's happened to me before. But it doesn't mean that you've lost the transfer. If it's just a tear, you can just be careful with it, and when you glue it down, see, look at that. That's what I mean. If I'm careful here, I can glue it down and that tear will just disappear. It was as if that happened in response to my bringing up the topic.
Now, I did say that the more water, the merrier, and that's true, but you may find that the paint film begins to reabsorb water and makes your film cloudy. Don't be too concerned about this. Once it dries a little bit, that cloudiness should go away again.
So as with the straight up transfers to the board, I'm not going to fiddle too much here. I'm going to put this aside and let it dry. And then I'm going to see where I've got to rub away more of the paper. And you can see that there's a lot of like paper still on here. It's a little harder to get off when it's, because it just sort of stays on, it stays there. So when it dries, I'll be able to brush this off more easily as well. There we go.
So what you're going to see me do here is use a stencil and put paint onto, in this case, a non-stick palette. And the idea is to make a shape, a repeated shape in this case. They don't have to be repeated shapes. But the idea is to put paint down on the palette and then to let it dry, remove it, and have like a paint sticker that you can then apply to your painting. So you're still using paint, but it's not being used in a traditional sense. So that's what is happening here, and I'm going to show you that it can also work on a piece of glass.
Here are some of the forms that I made with that stencil. And here it is. It's got a bunch of paint on it. And I did also use a paper one.
I did use a piece of printer paper and cut out a stencil and was able to use that stencil a number of times before it became sort of too waterlogged. But you don't need a special piece of plastic to make a stencil. You can use just about anything, although you might have to cut more than one of them if you use something like printer paper to do it. Cutting a stencil out of a thicker paper that you have to make a painting surface might be a good idea. I'm sorry I don't have that to show you. Somehow that particular filming didn't work.
But these may still be a little bit wet, but we'll just give it a shot and see what happens here. So remember that this palette has soap on it. And so I was able to just sort of go along and pick up that mark.
There are two important things to remember about this process. The first one is that you need to put a release down on your glass. And what that means is dish soap in your case. You're going to brush dish soap onto your glass, let it dry, and then you're going to put your shapes onto it. The second important thing to remember here is to mix medium into your paint when you do this. I found that some of the paint, it was too brittle if I did not mix medium into it. So I suggest mixing almost half and half paint and medium, and then putting that down, and you should be okay.
So here I've got most of these sort of worked out, and I just have them on a piece of paper here. Here are those other ones, which are kind of interesting. Like something like that. That could be sort of interesting. I also had a larger piece from before of just red paint that I then cut up into these little squares that could be glued down. So I've got a bunch of collage elements that are actually just made out of paint. Here's the film that I just removed the paper from. So it's very nice and contrasted on this side. This is a side that has the toner directly. We're seeing the toner, we're not seeing it through the film of medium. Here's this side where there's the film of medium. So where it's a little less visible, the medium is thicker. Where it's more visible, the medium is thinner. And so you can use either side depending on what your desires are for the collage that you're going to be making. In this case, I already put this on and rubbed it away, and I kind of like the idea of a bit of a mirror image. Now this is not something, your collages are going to be more complex than this, and they're required to be bigger, so therefore bigger and more complex. I'm just sort of reacting to the experiments that I'm doing to create this demo for you. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to glue this down and show you that, which is just a very simple process, but I thought I'd just do it quickly. And what I want to point out is that I've cut here with the scissors because I wanted to sort of be able to get in and kind of where I needed to and not cover up too much of this side of the other cat. But I've left this ragged side here. And so maybe we'll be able to see how both those edges work when they're glued down. And here's a kind of broken part, which I'm hoping that will be fine once it's glued down. So here I am about to apply the glue. I'm just sort of looking where the glue is going to go. Doesn't matter if it goes over more area than I need. It will just dry clear and matte. I'm going to lay this down. Went way over in some areas and not far enough in others. Hard to see with around the camera. So there I am. Here I am, just gluing it down.
Feel free to wear gloves to do this. It's another situation where I should be showing you properly by wearing gloves, but I didn't. So do what I say, not what I do.
I just want to show you a couple things with the paint that I took off the palette. I showed you this red paint. This isn't very thin. It's paint. It's leaf. It's like gold leaf thin sort of paint. And interestingly, I thought it was completely dry, but I think it's so thin that it's kind of stuck to itself, which is not a terrible thing in this case, although it makes it a little less useful. I'm showing you that because if you're using thin paint for this project and you're laying it out to store it before using, then you should be keeping that into account and trying not to stack them one on top of the other. So that's important.
So there are two required processes for this project. The first one is a transfer. One, you can do it straight onto the surface, or use a film, or you can use both, and you can use multiple pieces of transfer or areas of transfer on your surface. And the second one is to make paint into a kind of sticker material by putting it onto a glass palette that has the resist, letting it dry, and then using your palette knife to peel it off. And those are the required elements in this collage, but you also can do anything else that you feel is necessary to make the collage work. So you can bring paint into it, as you're going to see me do in a second, to integrate some of the collaged components. You can bring paint with a brush into other parts of it as well, or for other reasons as well. But this is your assignment, and this video will self-destruct in 5 seconds.
This tape will self-destruct in 5 seconds. Good luck, Jim.